Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our briefing on the City of Philadelphia's response to gun violence. This briefing is for press only. If you're not a member of the press, please log out and watch today's live stream on the City of Philadelphia's Facebook page. We will begin our briefing with remarks by Mayor Jim Kenney. Mayor, you have the floor.
Thanks, Sarah. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's update on the city's response to gun violence. There are a few updates we're sharing today as we continue working at all levels to address gun violence across the city. As many of you have seen, we announced a critical new tool to help us in this fight earlier this week. On Monday, we launched a new violence prevention hotline that will enhance our ability to deliver needed services while also allowing us to increase our ability to get people and resources to the resources and services they need in a timely fashion. This year, we continue to strive towards stronger collaboration and coordination across all of our services, but especially those dedicated to getting to the root of our gun violence crisis. While this is just one tool, the new hotline represents a big milestone in our fight against this crisis, one that will help save lives while connecting people to critical resources available in our communities. This 24-hour violence prevention hotline will help to reduce the likelihood of individuals engaging in violence by offering real-time access to critical violence prevention and intervention services. Help residents in neighborhoods experiencing a high level of violence connect with help to address quality of life issues, as well as trauma resulting from persistent gun violence. Residents can now call the violence prevention hotline by dialing 211 and choosing menu option 3. An available resource navigator will then assist you. Again, I want to remind folks that this hotline is not to report emergencies. If you are experiencing or witnessing an emergency, you should always call 911. The 211 violence prevention hotline is free and it's confidential. Also, residents who call the violence prevention hotline can receive assistance in their preferred language. I'm incredibly proud of the work done to get the hotline up and running and would like to recognize the United Way of Greater Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey and 211 Southeastern Pennsylvania for their work and dedication on this project. Again, thank you to our partners in City Council for helping us see this project to completion. And speaking of council, tomorrow I'll be introducing our fiscal year 23 budget proposal and 5-year plan. While I can't share specifics at this time, please know that every program, policy, and funding priority made by our administration was made with one thing in mind: how can we move all Philadelphia forward? And first and foremost, that means protecting our residents and keeping Philadelphians safe. Now, for further updates, I'll turn this over to Eric Atwood, Senior Director of the Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety.
Thank you, Mayor Kenney, and good afternoon, everyone. As the mayor mentioned, the city officially launched our violence prevention hotline this week. This hotline was created in the spirit of collaboration and is an attempt to bring all the city resources together in one place. And we invite our community partners and residents to find a way to plug into this vital resource. Organizations who are interested in becoming a part of the solution to gun violence can register to join to be a 211 service provider. The website to register is 211sepa.org/service-providers. And we'll provide this information for you all in writing. But we want to encourage organizations that are doing good work in their community to sign up to be a provider. Philadelphians can also apply to be a 211 resource navigator. This is hotline staff hotline staff receive 2 to 4 weeks of specialized training to become resource navigators. They also receive ongoing training in topics such as trauma-informed care and mental health first aid. To apply to be a resource navigator, you can email your resume to info@pa211sw.org. That's info@pa211sw.org. And just to remind everyone, the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Cluster, we're continuing our community listening tour throughout the month of April. We are excited and continue to see excellent attendance in our meetings, both in person and virtually, and we're learning a lot from all of you all in community. And we'll be out again in April, on April 12th at Nicetown CDC, April 19th at the Church of Christian Compassion, April 21st 21st at the Longcrest Recreation Center, April 26th at the Transfiguration Baptist Church, and April 27th, we'll be doing a specialized youth focus meeting in partnership with Dimples for Days. You can register for these meetings on our website at phila.gov/CJPS, or go through our Instagram at Philly Alive 215. Again, I really want to encourage folks to join us in person or virtually for our community listening sessions to begin to better build partnerships with community members, inform folks who are most vulnerable to gun violence of resources that are available, as well as learn from you all about where we need to allocate resources and build stronger partnerships as it relates to the roadmap to safer communities. And with that, I will hand it over to Commissioner Outlaw.
Thank you, Erica. Over the last several weeks, we've seen a continuation of some of the same troubling trends that we've been experiencing over the last several years, with an overall increase in the number of homicides being at the top of the list. As of today, our numbers are just under 2% above where they were at this point last year. Again, there are people that may think that I sound like a broken record, but I can't stress this enough. I'm going to keep saying it in case there's any confusion. There's not one single issue that's more important to myself or to the members of the Philadelphia Police Department than fighting the violent crime that continues to plague our city. This department will not be intimidated by those who believe that they can victimize our communities without recourse. Those individuals will be found, they'll be arrested, and they will have to face their day in court. Shortly, you're going to hear from Deputy Commissioner Joel Dales, who's our Deputy Commissioner over Patrol. And during his presentation, you'll see that there is currently a significant year-over-year increase in the number of homicides in our Operation Pinpoint grids. But almost paradoxically, you'll also see that the total number of shootings in those same grids is actually down year over year. So how can that be? Given that Operation Pinpoint is our strategy, why are we seeing increases in the areas where we know the most crimes are existing? The truth is that these homicides aren't happening in a vacuum. And as DC Dales will elaborate during his presentation, there are those out there who are quite frankly just determined to attack and kill their victims. And while we are making constant adjustments to mitigate this sickening reality, plainly put, our officers just can't keep up by being everywhere at all times. But I can assure you that the Philadelphia Police Department is working diligently to address these issues. We know where the issues lie. And as I've reported previously, we're adjusting the way we do things here in the department to meet the needs of the community and then to get ahead of these troubling crime numbers. We'll continue to adjust and then deploy our resources to where the data leads us, and we'll be relentless in our pursuit of providing the level of public safety that Philadelphians expect and deserve. Speaking of resources, our department continues to deal with staffing issues, and quite frankly, we need more boots on the ground. Our department is nearly 700 police officers down from where we were just a few years back, and bolstering our ranks is integral to effectively carrying out our mission, not just citywide, but specifically within our pinpoint grids, as I just discussed. To that end, I want to remind everyone that we're currently in a recruitment period, and we're still accepting applications until April 1st. So if you or anybody you know is interested in becoming a police officer, please visit our website at www.joinphillypd.com for more information, or you can call 215-683-COPS or 215-683-2677 to speak directly with the recruiter. Lastly, before I turn this over to Deputy Commissioner Dales, our Deputy Commissioner over Patrol, I want to briefly switch gears and let everyone know that tomorrow, in the spirit of Women's History Month, tomorrow, Thursday, March 31st, we will be streaming a Women's Her Story Month fireside chat between myself and the 83rd Attorney General of the United States, Madam General Loretta Lynch. For those that don't know, AG Lynch is the highest African-American ranking woman in law enforcement to date, and she will be sharing how through her driven purpose, she was able to break barriers and fully take on the responsibilities of a trailblazer. If you want to register or for more information, please visit our social media accounts, whether at Philly Police on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find the link to register. I'd like now to introduce Deputy Commissioner Joe Dales, who's again our Deputy Commissioner over Patrol Operations, to discuss what we're seeing specifically in our pinpoint grids, as I referenced earlier. He'll be followed by Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, who's our Deputy Commissioner over Investigations, who will then provide an update on a number of cases that we wish to highlight. Deputy Commissioner Dales.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you pull up the slides, please? Next slide. Okay, I will start with the citywide homicide and shooting victim stats. Looking at the top of the chart year to date as of March 27th, Philadelphia had 120 homicides and 491 shooting victims. In comparison to last year, homicides are up 3%, 120 in 2022 and 116 in 2021. And shooting victims are up 4%, 491 this year, 473 in 2021. Looking at the bottom left of the chart, it shows the motives for the homicides. The top three motives remain the same: arguments, drugs, and domestic. And the clearance rate is now at 48%. I would like to make note, as of this morning, that that percentage is up to, I believe, up to 50 or 51 now as far as the clearance rate. Next slide, please. All right, this slide shows the causes of death for the homicides year to date as of March 27th. The top three causes are: number one, gunshot wounds; number two, stabbing; and number three, blunt force trauma. I want to point out that in reference to the 106 homicides where the cause of death were by gunshot wound, 3 of the homicides are delayed cases, meaning the date of the assault occurred prior to 2022, but the victims succumbed to their injuries in 2022. Next slide, please. All right, this slide shows the homicides and shooting victims in the pinpoint grids year to date percentage change comparison within a 6-week period as of March 27th of 2022. So starting at the left of the chart, the last time we met, I mentioned that the homicides peaked at 63% in our pinpoint grids during the week of February 14th and started declining during the week of February 21st. We continue to see a downward trend in the homicides and a slight increase during the week of 3/21, which the blue line represents the homicides, which is at 41% this week. However, looking at the bottom of the chart, the shooting victims percentages, which is the orange line, stayed relatively flat within a 3-week period from February 14th through February 28th, and then started declining during the week of March 7th through the week of March 14th, and where we're currently at 9% for the week. Although the homicides percentages are high in the pinpoint grids, the shooting victims are down in the grids year to date. What we're seeing high numbers of FCCs at the crime scenes. If you look at the news, you'll see numerous FCCs at the scene, meaning that the offender, they are shooting more rounds to pretty much try to hit their targets, in which they actually are. And looking at multiple videos, some of the offenders are at close range to the victim during the shootings, which increases the chances of striking lethal areas of the body. So this is why I believe the homicide numbers are higher than the shooting victims within these grids. And I want to note that as of today, homicides in the pinpoint grids are at 37%. So we are going down again. We went from 41, now we're going down to 37 as of today. And in reference to the shooting victims, we are down to 11% as far as shooting victims within the pinpoint grids as of today. Next slide, please. All right, this slide shows the total VUF arrests year to date for 2022 from January 1st to March 27th. So far this year, we have made 569 VUF arrests. This time last year, we had 809 VUF arrests and 402 VUF arrests in 2020, which shows an increase in VUF arrests by 42% when comparing 2022 year-to-date total with 2020, and a decrease in VUF arrests by negative 30% when comparing 2022 year-to-date with 2021. Next slide, please. Okay, as of March 28th, 1,390 crime guns were recovered in our city. When comparing the total crime guns recovered from January through February in 2022, which is 975, with the total count per year from January through February in 2019 through 2021, it shows that we have currently surpassed those numbers, as you can see. So in 2019, we're at 710, 2020, 752, and 962 in 2021. And I want to point out that last year, March, which is shaded in blue, was the highest month of crime guns confiscations, which totaled 555 crime guns. So far this year, we confiscated 415 crime guns in the month of March. Next slide, please. And lastly, in reference to the privately made firearms, also known as ghost guns, we recovered as of March 28th, we are now at 113, which is more than the total number of PMFs recovered by the end of 2018 and 2019 combined. And with that, I will now turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Investigations, and he will speak about cases we wish to highlight.
Thanks, Deputy Dales. Good afternoon, everyone. And today I'm going to be providing homicide arrest updates, as I normally do at these press conferences. And since our last press conference, police have arrested 8 individuals wanted for committing homicides. In addition, I'll be featuring fugitives currently wanted for recent homicides. And finally, I'll be touching on recent carjacking arrests by our officers. Put up the next slide, and the following slides are of individuals arrested. Be listing those incidents chronologically by the date of occurrence from earliest to most recent, starting with an incident that occurred in 2018. Our first arrest photo is Leon Harris, and on March 29th, 48-year-old Leon Harris was arrested in New Jersey for the homicide of his mother, 62-year-old Victoria Harris. Ms. Harris went missing back on July 11th of 2018 from the 400 block of West Clearfield Street. Her remains were subsequently found decomposing inside of a suitcase on July 17th of 2018 on the 2700 block of Ruby Street. The arrest warrant for Mr. Harris was obtained just recently on March 24th of this year, and Leon Harris is in custody, as I said, in New Jersey. He'll be transported to Philadelphia to be formally charged in the near future. Next slide is Louis Ramos Banks. And on March 18th, 31-year-old Louis Ramos Banks was arrested and charged with the stabbing murder of 48-year-old Lance Shelby. The incident occurred on January 30th of 2021 on the 100 block of East Wishart Street. This case was previously cleared with the arrest of Michael Hernandez Romero on May the 4th of 2021. This is the second arrest in that case. Next is a arrested photo of Akira Jackson. And I spoke about Mr. Jackson back on our press conference on March the 2nd, that he had been arrested in Huntington, Pennsylvania. And as a reminder, back on March, and then up to date on March 21st, just last week, 21-year-old Akira Jackson was transported to Philadelphia. He was formally charged with the murder of 28-year-old Mujahim Hussein. The incident occurred on August the 3rd of 2021 on the 2700 block of South Front Street in the parking lot of the Cheerleaders Club. The homicide stemmed from a robbery at that location. Next is 19-year-old Ethan Senbong Fang, whom I spoke about being wanted during our last press conference. And on March 28th, Ethan Senbong Fang was arrested for the murder of 25-year-old Akil Athi, who was shot 20 times. The incident occurred on September the 4th, 2021, on the 2400 block of Sheridan Street. Next is Rashad Cherry. On March 20th, 19-year-old Rashad Cherry was arrested for the homicide of 25-year-old Devin Harris Harper. Incident occurred on January 22nd of this year on the 3500 block of Scotts Lane. Next is a photo of Lauren Hargrove. And on March 19th, 30-year-old Lauren Hargrove was arrested for the stabbing murder of her boyfriend, 29-year-old John Furby Chamberlain. The incident occurred on March 13th on the 1900 block of South 17th Street. Next are photos of Karan Robinson and Ishmael Tiku. And on March 25th, 20-year-old Karan Robinson and 20-year-old Ishmael Teku were arrested for the shooting murder of 43-year-old Hassan Johnson. The incident occurred on March 23rd on the 5200 block of Montour Street. Next are photos of Derek Robinson and Nicole Lee. And on March 29th, 29-year-old Derek Robinson and 36-year-old Nicole Lee were arrested for the homicide of 58-year-old Ty Holmes. The incident occurred on March 23rd on the 4200 block of Frankfurt Avenue. This happened inside of the location. The motive for the homicide appears to be robbery. Next, I'm going to be featuring individuals that are wanted for homicides. First is 22-year-old Kamal Bennett. He's wanted for the homicide of 20-year-old Jasmine Lewis, and he also shot another victim who survived the incident. The incident occurred on August 27th of 2020 in the 6000 block of East Worcester Street. The arrest warrant was just obtained on March 24th of this year. Outstanding work by our homicide investigators. Next is 19-year-old Samir Harrell. He's wanted for the shooting murder of 32-year-old Lafayette Holt. The incident occurred on November the 6th, 2021 on the 6000 block of Regent Street. The arrest warrant was obtained on March 18th. Next is Nazir Sims, 24-year-old Nazir Sims wanted for the shooting murder of 21-year-old Imad Selaman. The incident occurred on February the 7th of this year on the 5900 block of Bennington Street. The arrest warrant was obtained on March 23rd. This case was previously cleared with the arrest of Dacia Sims on March the 7th, which I announced during our last press conference. Nazir and Dacia are siblings. Nazir Sims was identified as the person responsible for shooting and killing Mr. Selaman. Next is 43-year-old Shahid Parker, also known as Shahid Tomini. He's wanted for the murder of 39-year-old Dorian Silva Sr., who was shot multiple times for an incident that occurred on March 16th of this year on the 700 block of West Luzerne Street. The arrest warrant was obtained on March 18th. Anyone has information pertaining to any of these suspects' whereabouts, we urge you to please call our homicide unit, 215-686-3334, or as always, our tip line, 215-686-TIPS. That's 215-686-8477. Next, we're going to be talking about carjacking arrests. I'm going to highlight some of the fine work that's being conducted by our Major Crimes Carjacking Task Force and some recent carjacking arrests. The first one is a slide from January the 31st of this year. And in this incident, the complainant was cleaning out his car on the 7300 block of Whitaker Avenue. He was approached by 3 males armed with handguns. The males took the keys, threatened to shoot him, took the vehicle, and fled. And on February 2nd, police located the vehicle and the suspect, later identified as now 18-year-old Khair Ladson. Ladson was arrested and charged with theft and receiving stolen property. He was subsequently released from those charges, but through continued investigation by our carjacking task force, detectives were able to obtain an arrest warrant on March 18th for Mr. Ladson, charging him with robbery, carjacking, violation of the Uniform Firearms Act, and related offenses in reference to that January 31st carjacking. On March 28th, Mr. Ladson was arrested, and he's now being held on $1 million bail. Next is from an incident that occurred around 5000 Pentridge. And in the last press conference, I featured the arrest of 2 18-year-old males, Deviant Lewis and Tariq Carter. I spoke about 2 males were arrested for carjacking that occurred on the 1900 block of Wharton Street on March the 6th at 8:30 in the evening. Mr. Lucas and Mr. Carter were both given, they were given bails. Mr. Lucas had $50,000 and Mr. Carter had $75,000. They both posted the bail. A few days later, they were released. Investigators from our carjacking task force continued to conduct the investigation into a separate carjacking that had occurred on March the 6th, just hours prior to the one they were arrested for, at 6:30 p.m. on the 5000 block of Pentridge Street in Southwest Philadelphia. Our investigators connected Mr. Lucas and Mr. Carter to the carjackings on 5000 Pentridge, and based on the evidence that was collected, the detectives obtained arrest warrants for both of the individuals on March 14th in reference to that carjacking that took place on 5000 Pentridge. Both males were arrested by police on March 21st They were charged with robbery, carjacking, VUFA, Violation of Uniform Firearms Act, related offenses. And now they're both being held on $1 million each. Next is a case that had received a significant amount of media attention because of the circumstances. And it involves multiple incidents. And now I have all the details of the incidents that the individuals are charged with. We made the arrest based on an incident from 12,000 Knights Road up in the Philadelphia Mills. And it started on March 17th, the day that it actually ended was March 17th. And the incident occurred at 10:20 on that date. Complainant had been entering her vehicle parked in the Philadelphia Mills Mall when the first offender, a 17-year-old male, he entered the vehicle from the passenger side, said, "Give me everything you've got," while pointing a black and silver handgun at the complainant. The suspect got into the complainant's vehicle. He forced her over to the passenger seat, got into the driver's seat. He was pointing a black and silver handgun at the complainant. He drove to the Wawa at 7912 East Roosevelt Boulevard, withdrew $600 from her cards. The second offender, a 19-year-old female, got into the driver's seat of the complainant's vehicle subsequent to that $600 withdrawal, pointed a knife at her, and told her that if you call the police, we'll come to your house and hurt you. The first offender got into a different vehicle, and the second offender drove the vehicle away with the complainant still inside. The second offender drove a few blocks, told the complainant at that point to get out of the vehicle, and they fled into separate vehicles. About 5 hours later, detectives assigned to the Major Crimes Carjacking Task Force tracked the vehicle to the 2300 block of Cotman Avenue. The task force received information from the complainant that the complainant's card was being used at a store on 2300 Cotman. Both offenders were observed exiting the store. They were stopped. The complainant was brought to the location and positively identified both offenders as the offenders that committed the carjacking, robbery, and the abduction. Now and this is the slide about the complainant's vehicle was on location. Recovered from inside of that vehicle was a black with silver BB gun. That's the BB gun on the right, as well as a black and silver folding knife. Both of these crime instruments were used to threaten the complainant during the abduction and the carjacking. We followed up on this investigation and were able to clear subsequently other jobs. You can go to the next slide. There were 4 other victims that were contacted, brought to the location where the offenders were stopped. All 4 victims positively identified the offenders as the individuals who had committed the robberies and the thefts in their incidents. And those 4 incidents are, the first one was on March 9th. The offenders attempted to abduct and carjack a victim point of gun on the 1900 block of Lansing Street. The victim identified both of the offenders on March 17th as the male and female suspects who had attempted to carjack her on March the 9th. On March 15th at 12:30 p.m. on the 800 block of Arnold Street, victim had been accosted by the offenders who attempted to rob her point of gun. The victim positively identified the offenders on March 17th as the offenders who attempted to rob her. And on March 15th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at the Philadelphia Mills Mall, the offenders accosted and abducted another victim point of gun, drove her to the same Wawa on Roosevelt Boulevard, and withdrew $600 from the victim's cards. The offenders released the victim, took her vehicle. The offenders were positively identified on March 17th who had committed that offense. And then on March 16th, from the 9300 block of Cruztown Road, the complainant left his vehicle running in the parking lot of the Wawa. The complainant observed the male offender enter the vehicle, he fled, and the complainant was able to positively identify the offenders as those who had taken his vehicle. In total, the 17-year-old male offender and the female offender has been identified as 19-year-old Ariana Mojica, have been charged with 2 kidnappings, 3 carjackings, multiple counts of robbery, receiving stolen property, theft, and related offenses. Investigators discovered the 2 offenders had committed also 2 carjackings in Ben Salem. The 17-year-old has been charged as an adult. He's being held on $1.5 million bail, and Ariana Mojica, the female, is being held on a total of also almost $1.5 million bail. The next slide is for an incident that occurred from 5326 Oakland Street. And on March 18th at around 11:30 p.m., the complainant was delivering food to the 2300 block of Oakland Street. He was approached by 3 unknown males. They were all armed with handguns. The offenders demanded the complainant's property, threatened to shoot him if he refused. The offenders got into the complainant's vehicle and fled. Further investigation by detectives from our carjacking task force led to a suspect, 18-year-old Arnell Moore. Members of the carjacking task force executed a search warrant on the residence of Mr. Moore, placed him in custody at that time, and during the execution of the search warrant, our detectives recovered a 9mm handgun and a BB gun. You see both of those images up on the screen. And on March 23rd, Mr. Moore was arrested and charged with robbery, carjacking, VUFA, and related offenses. The carjacking task force is continuing to investigate the other males involved in the carjacking, as well as Mr. Moore's possible involvement in other recent carjackings. His bail was set at $350,000 initially. The next slide is from 1400 Kerbal. You see a crime scene on your screen. And on February 10th at 10 o'clock, the complainant was seated in her vehicle. She was approached by 3 males, all armed with guns. The offenders entered her vehicle, pointed a gun at the complainant, demanding money. The complainant ran from the vehicle, and as she ran away, she heard several gunshots, but fortunately, the complainant was not injured by that gunfire. There were 8 9mm fired cartridge casings recovered from the scene of the incident. Through further investigation by our carjacking task force, detectives were able to identify one of the male suspects as 18-year-old Dante Willoughby. An arrest warrant for Dante Willoughby was obtained on March 14th, and on March 16th, Dante Willoughby was arrested and charged with carjacking, robbery, aggravated assault, VUFA, and related offenses. His bail has been set at $100,000. And our final slide will be for an incident from 5100 Wyalusing Avenue. And finally, on March 25th, the complainant was attempting to make a food delivery on the 5100 block of Wyalusing Avenue. She was approached by an unknown female offender. The offender demanded money and the complainant's cell phone while holding a knife in her right hand. The offender took the complainant's vehicle key and drove off in the complainant's Jeep. Approximately 25 minutes later, the offender returned to the area where the complainant and the police were still on location. The complainant positively identified the 39-year-old female as the individual who had robbed her. The offender was identified as Gina Anderson. She was placed into custody. The complainant's vehicle was located shortly after the arrest on the 5100 block of Westminster Avenue. It had heavy front end damage. The bail in this case was set at $175,000. And all of these are just some of the examples of the cases our major crimes task force have been continuing to follow up on and investigate. They're exhausting every investigative means available for the carjackings, and we are seeing some really outstanding results. And I'm grateful for their hard work. And now I'm going to turn us back to Sarah at the mayor's office. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move to Q&A for members of the press. Because of limited time, only one representative from each media outlet is permitted to ask questions. Reporters are asked to limit their questions to 2 or fewer. Today, we are limiting topics to questions related to the presentations. Questions regarding the proposed budget can be asked in a briefing later today. Details were issued about that briefing in a separate advisory. Armando is also available for Spanish interpretation as needed. If you would like to ask a question, please use the raise your hand feature, and we will unmute your microphone when it is your turn. First up, we will go to Miguel Martinez from Univision.
Hello, good afternoon, buenas tardes. Armando, ¿se puede traducir la pregunta, por favor? Mi primera pregunta es para el alcalde. ¿Qué les diría a los residentes que no se sienten seguros en Filadelfia? Ellos se sienten que la policía y la ciudad no lo han estado protegiendo.
The first question is for Mayor. Mayor, what would you tell the residents of the city of Philadelphia who feel that the Philadelphia police have not been protecting them?
First of all, the Philadelphia police has been protecting them. We've had officers almost killed recently on various different nights. we are confiscating thousands of guns off the street, and the police are working their rear ends off trying to keep people safe. What I would do is I'd say to the people of Philadelphia, start calling legislators in Harrisburg and asking them why you can get a gun in Pennsylvania faster than you can get a driver's license. But don't put this on the police, because the police are doing their level best under bad circumstances because they're down in ranks and we can't hire people because council put in effect a residency clause that keeps us recruiting around the country. So I would ask them to get a hold of their legislators and find out why you can get a gun in Pennsylvania as quickly as you can, and how do 15-year-olds get guns?
La respuesta, Miguel, es que en primer lugar, la policía ha estado protegiendo a los residentes. Muchos oficiales de policía, lamentablemente, han perdido la vida recientemente y también hemos estado confiscando armas de fuego. Quiero que sepa la gente que estamos trabajando duramente para mantenerlos seguros. Lo que les diría a las personas es que llamen a sus legisladores en Harrisburg, especialmente, para preguntar cómo así es que es posible obtener una licencia de conducir con menores dificultades para obtener cómo obtener un arma de fuego con menores dificultades que las que hay para obtener una licencia de conducir. No quiero que se culpe a la policía, porque nosotros no estamos haciendo esto de una manera descuidada. Nosotros también tenemos una dificultad para poder reclutar oficiales de policía y candidatos para nuestra academia por las dificultades de los requisitos de residencia que impiden que los candidatos sean residentes del condado de Filadelfia. Entonces les urgiría a las personas que contacten a sus legisladores y que pregunten cómo así es posible obtener un arma de fuego con mayor facilidad que una licencia de conducir, incluyendo para los chicos de 15 años de edad. Gracias.
Otra pregunta también, pero con las personas que estuve hablando hoy, por ejemplo, una madre que dijo que sus hijos, tienen miedo a que sus hijos salgan este verano porque no se siente que las calles están seguras. Dicen que acciones como el nuevo sistema del 211 no son suficientes. Los residentes no se sienten que son suficientes. Entonces, tanto la comisionada como el alcalde pueden responder a este tipo de cosas, como que una madre que no se sienta que su hijo pueda salir a la calle.
The next question can be either answered by the commissioner or the mayor. And this is in connection with a conversation that I had with a mother who fears her children getting out in the streets this summer and being safe. Also, what about the 211 new system that's been in place, thinking that this is not enough for them? So what would you tell this mother about her fears of having her children playing out in the streets this summer?
Commissioner, would you please take this?
Hi there. We're asked this question not just the summer, but year round. We ask about the safety of our young people, and we also talk about the safety of our young adults. We're not just dealing with the fear of crime, we're dealing with the perception of the fear of crime. And we will continue, like I said, to do everything that we can do within our power with the resources that we have to address the violent crime that we've been seeing. I do not believe that this is the time to stay indoors when the weather gets warmer. I don't think we should turn into hermits. We should still continue on and live our regular lives. With that said, it's important when we know there's things going on in our neighborhoods to call 911 and to report it. When there's crimes and there's witness information that would be useful to the police department, or even if you don't think it's useful to us into our investigations, we encourage you to call us either anonymously and leave a tip through our tip line, or again to dial 911. We need witnesses to come forward. This is a collaboration. And in order for any of this to work, we all have to be aligned and on the same page. So again, we share the same concerns around the safety and security of all of our Philadelphians and those people who are coming to visit. But all of that to say, I don't think this is a reason to keep our young people indoors. We are stepping up and increasing security around the areas where we know our young people will be during the summer. And we're also partnering with those other partners here in the city that are providing summer programming to ensure that we have high visibility and presence.
La respuesta que nos da la comisionada Nash es que no solamente tenemos este problema en el tiempo del verano, sino alrededor del año, y nos preocupa obviamente la seguridad de los jóvenes y de los jóvenes adultos por el temor que tienen ante el crimen, pero también es un problema de percepción, no solamente del temor, sino la percepción del temor. Estamos haciendo todo lo que podemos con los recursos que tenemos disponibles para reducir el crimen y estamos viendo que no es importante o necesario decirle a la gente joven que se quede en sus casas, sino que salgan, que no estén como ermitaños encerrados y que continúen viviendo sus vidas. Es importante, sin embargo, que se llame al 911 para reportar crímenes, delitos, información o pistas que pudieran ser útiles o no, según la decisión de los investigadores, Por lo tanto, les alentamos a los familiares y a los adultos, también a los jóvenes, que llamen para dejar nuestras pistas, ya sea anónimamente o al 911 cuando sea una emergencia. Tenemos colaboraciones que continúan con diferentes miembros de la comunidad y nosotros mostramos un interés para mantener seguros a los ciudadanos de Filadelfia y a nuestros visitantes, pero tenemos que alinearnos para lograr un resultado positivo. Y no hay ninguna razón para mantenerse encerrados. Nosotros estamos elevando el patrullaje y la seguridad en las áreas que nosotros sabemos frecuentan la gente joven y por lo tanto nosotros pedimos de que la gente tenga esta percepción y que vea que estamos haciendo lo posible para mantenerlos seguros. Muchas gracias.
And Armando, if I could add to that answer, 211 to that mother Miguel. 211 is exactly she's exactly the person we want to engage with 211. If she doesn't know what organizations are available for her children that are safe, that are vetted, that are trusted, this is how she connects. This is how we keep our kids safe. And I would encourage her to call today or text today to 898. Is it 898-211? We'll make sure we'll get you the right information. But this is how she keeps her kids safe.
La comisionada Atwood nos agrega que el 211 es exactamente el tipo de recurso que esta madre debiera apelar, porque ahí puede enterarse de organizaciones que han sido ya registradas y revisadas para ofrecer servicios de entretenimiento para la comunidad y los chicos jóvenes y que son organizaciones confiables. También le pediría que llame o envíe un texto el día de hoy al 311 para encontrar recursos y organizaciones que puedan proporcionarle un entretenimiento seguro a sus niños este verano. Muchas gracias.
Otra pregunta, en clarificación con el 211, ¿tiene servicio en español ya?
Further follow-up question in regards to the 211 service. Is it offering assistance in Spanish at this time already?
Yeah, I said that in my remarks.
Sí, así es. Eso es lo que mencioné en los comentarios iniciales que hice el día de hoy. Miguel, muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Ellie Rushing with the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Hi. On the case of the two individuals who were performing multiple carjackings and kidnappings, to clarify, they were connected to 5 incidents in Philadelphia and 2 in Bensalem?
We have a total of 5 in the city and 2 in Bensalem at this point. That's correct.
Okay. And the 2 individuals are they like siblings? What's kind of the relationship between them?
I don't have a familial relationship with them, but they were working in concert in all of these incidents.
Gotcha. It seems like the department has made a lot of progress in carjacking arrests. I wonder if there's any new information you can share on where the cars go, any new information on kind of what's leading to this increase in that type of crime?
It's a really good question. We are seeing a significant number of the carjackings continue to be related to deliveries. I think you heard me speak about a couple of them. We think that in a number of the cases, the individuals that are bent on committing the carjackings are calling somebody to a location that is obviously not their real location, but in the vicinity where they are. We call those setup robberies. They're oftentimes using a number that may not be a legitimate number. There are steps we believe that the delivery people could take in order to help themselves, which would be to call the number, verify the identity of somebody, and do a call back on that number to make sure that it's a legitimate number. Make sure that that information is passed on to someone else in case the car is taken, in case their phone is taken. Sometimes we have the phone is taken and then the individual can't even tell us what number made the order for the delivery. But again, it's the basic steps that we've always been talking about when it comes to steps that can be taken to protect yourself during carjackings, which include keeping your doors locked, recognizing your surroundings, looking around. And I think something that maybe it doesn't go without saying, if something doesn't feel right, the individual should drive away. they can go a block away, 2 blocks away, especially if they're doing delivery, and make a phone call and ask to meet somewhere else if they have to. Now, for the people who are pulling up in their houses or into a parking area, parking, getting into and out of the car is still the largest number of carjackings that we're seeing. And that goes back to the same thing, recognizing your surroundings and being aware of what's going on. But please, everybody needs to know they should always have their doors locked when they're sitting in their car. We know that that has thwarted many carjackings or a number of carjacking attempts. The door is locked, they can't get in, they don't want to break the window because if the window is broken, the car is not as relevant to them. So there are steps that can be done. We're making a lot of arrests. We've made over 100 arrests already this year, and we're seeing some progress. We see the numbers trending down, and we anticipate that we'll continue to see a really positive downward trend in these carjackings.
Thank you. And then my next question is for Commissioner.
Ellie.
Sorry.
Hi. Sorry, do you mind if we get through the first round of questions and then we can come back to you if there's time for a second round?
Sure.
Great, thank you. So next up, we'll go to Yaima Crespo from NBC 10 Telemundo 62. Hi, Yaima.
Hi, how are you? This is for our Spanish speakers for Telemundo 62. En Armando, le quiero preguntar a la comisionada sobre qué pasos están tomando para trabajar con la gente joven. Estamos viendo que muchos de estos crímenes o las víctimas son jóvenes o quienes los están cometiendo son jóvenes. ¿Qué tipo de programas, cómo van a enfrentar esto? ¿Qué ayuda hay para los jóvenes?
The question is for Commissioner Outlaw, and I would like to ask you about the steps that are being taken in order to work with the young people who are both victims and victimaries in these crimes. What is available for the young people at this time?
Erica, do you want to take that question first?
Sure. So recently, we established the Office of Victim Services, or the Office of the Victim Advocate, which is available to Derek Holmes, our newly appointed victim advocate, is available and able to connect families and individuals to supports that are directly available. There are also a number of victim serving organizations across the city, and we'll be able to provide those in a number of which we are working in partnership with the city of Philadelphia, Amir being one, Mothers in Charge being services being the third. So there are a number that are here for those who have been directly impacted either as a victim or a co-victim of violence. There is a strong and supportive network of organizations across the city that are here for families and individuals and young people who have been directly impacted by violence.
La primera respuesta viene de Erica Nash y nos dice que recientemente se ha establecido la Oficina de Defensoría de las Víctimas, que cuenta con recursos disponibles para ayudar y conectar a las familias, a los individuos con organizaciones a lo largo de la ciudad que proporcionan servicios adicionales, tales como Mirrors o Mothers in Charge, para ayudar a las víctimas y a las personas afectadas alrededor de estas víctimas. Hay una red completa de organizaciones que proporcionan servicios tanto a familias como a individuos y a gente joven para lidiar con estos problemas. Gracias.
Es todo de mi parte. Gracias, Armando.
Muchas gracias, Yaima. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yaima. Ellie, did you have any additional follow-ups?
Yeah, I had one for Commissioner Outlaw. You've talked a lot about recruiting, trying to find ways to fill vacancies in the police department, and some have called for the actual number of police positions to be increased. It's been kind of signaled that the police budget, could increase this year, and we might see funding for additional vacancies. But will the department have the ability to recruit for these new positions if it's already struggling to fill the ones that it has?
I think that's a really, really good question, and I appreciate you asking that. The answer could be yes, but the issue is that we need to increase our authorized strength so that we can constantly recruit to get to the number where we need to be. once we reach our current authorized strength, that number is still isn't going, it's not enough, given that, you know, we're about 10% less than where we were years ago. So that critical number is the authorized strength. And then it also allows us to constantly recruit. I mean, I think I put out the recruiting message in this forum. It's not very often. It's because there are recruitment periods. And we've only been able to put that message out as frequently as we have recently, because we didn't have the 4 academies that we would usually have in the year 2020. So again, it's about increasing the authorized strength and our ability to constantly recruit, to make sure that we have classes going, to not only get to the number where we think we should be, but to also compensate for the attrition that we see.
The other issue, frankly, is that a couple times this summer, you will see at Citizens Bank Park an NYPD police van recruiting people in this region to become police officers. The current situation we have now in Philadelphia is that in order to work for the city, including the police department, you have to establish residency in the city for a full year prior to your application to be a police officer. Not once you're offered a job, but prior to you even trying to apply, you have to live here for a year. That's not a good situation. We need to recruit around the country to get the best and the brightest out of our HBCUs, our universities, our military bases. We need to attract new young families to move into the city in any job, whether it's a police officer, whether it's in the health department or a license inspection or the water department. But it's basically like saying you can only play for the Phillies if you grew up in Philadelphia. It's not the situation. It's not the normal situation around the country. So when we're having officers that are retiring at the pace they're retiring because they're burnt out from their jobs, and then trying to recruit people who don't necessarily maybe want to be a police officer because it's a dangerous, sometimes thankless job. If you cut down that pool of applicants from a normal 5,000 or so that takes the test before down to 2,000, you're going to be at a deficit. There's just no way around it. And I understand what council tried to do, what council did, and what the rationale behind it was. But in the end, if council members are requesting that we increase our police force, they got to take the handcuffs, so to speak, off our ability to recruit.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, this is the last call for questions. Okay, thank you, everybody. That concludes today's briefing. We will reconvene in 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Please continue to send all press inquiries to press@phila.gov.